A final decision on the SRV is thankfully not before us this evening, but I think that it gives us a strategic opportunity to consider what I think we should see as a linked issue, and that is the issue of rating fairness. If the SRV is about the size of the pie, then rating fairness is about the various levers that we are able to pull to ensure that, to the greatest extent that we are able to, that those rates are levied in a way that is fairest. Notwithstanding Mr Gribben's remarks, this is not just about Oakville. Oakville is the poster child because it's where these distortions are most acute. But I am talking about rating fairness across the entire LGA. In the background to my motion, and indeed as a refrain for each of the last 9 years, I have quoted the 19th century economist Edwin Cannon in relation to the imposition of local taxation. He said, "Every inhabitant of a district should be made to contribute according to his ability, and everyone who receives benefit from the local expenditure should be made to contribute in proportion to the benefit he receives." As you all know, the Office of Local Government reframed this principle in the Council Rating and Revenue Raising Manual, which is still an applicable document, as the requirement for us to be obliged to be mindful of both a ratepayer's access to services and their ability to pay when setting our rating policies. I think that we need to confront the reality that our whole rate-setting machinery is broken, something that is acknowledged in the manual, as it was in the IPART 2016 report into rating structures. Both documents acknowledge that land value is increasingly a poor approximation for both these metrics, and that this results in a loss of what is called horizontal equity. The purpose of this notice of motion is to give the Council, and indeed the Chamber, the opportunity to publicly demonstrate that it is going to examine, for the first time in nearly a decade, the mechanisms that we can use to promote horizontal equity. I call out the desirability of reintroducing a rural residential category as one way of improving equity, but you will notice that my motion in Part 2C gives staff the remit to look at any other strategies. It does not escape my attention that Blacktown, for example, offers not only the standard pensioner discount to eligible ratepayers, but an additional $200 for those who, by and large, are in the greatest cost of living pinch. Campbelltown, Cumberland, Parramatta, Northern Beaches, Randwick, Sutherland and Waverley all do the same. Ku-ring-gai does it by way of an 8.5% discount for pensioners rather than a dollar amount. Woollahra does it by exempting pensioners from some specific charges like their environmental and infrastructure levy. IPART recommended in their report that there be new mechanisms, such as the creation of new categories and subcategories like an environmental land category. We have a bevy of property types which are exempt from rates altogether, like churches and schools, and I think that many people think that they can and should make a contribution, especially when the tenants are private schools with fat balances or state government tenants. I would like to know whether we might use the definition of rural land in the OLG's rating manual rather than the definition in the Local Government Act to give relief to acreage landowners between 2 and 5 acres. I'd like to know whether the mechanism that I've proposed will improve horizontal equity for households who are paying twice or more than twice the amount of rates that other families are paying, despite the fact that their access to services, rubbish collected, roads repaired, and their ability to pay, as the statistical demographic data in our own social atlas reveals, and Mr Gribben said as much in his presentation, is identical. I cannot accept the claim, as has been made before in this place, that acreage landowners deserve to pay twice as much because they're rich and can well afford to pay. Claims like these may explain why the Greens vote in these suburbs is usually under 5%.
Mr Mayor, do we have to go through this bullshit again? Really?
Yes.
Yes, Fab.
Mr Mayor, I think my comment was fair game. If I'll resume and take the rest of my time if I'm able. I believe this notice of motion, if passed, may take some of the heat out of the public's perception that we are out of our mind to ask for such a significant SRV when the last one finished its rollout only 4 years ago. Australians are very sensitive to the issue of fairness. This motion does not by itself change any council policy, but it asks for a report to look at what might be done. On that basis, I hold some hope that every councillor who cares about fairness will be prepared to support it. Thank you.
Councillors Brogna.
Mr Mayor, I'm speaking against the amendment. The amendment, to my mind, looks like a very pale shadow of the considered words that I'd put together and was seeking support for. I'll be specific. I mean, we have particular circumstances here, and I've articulated as best I can the fact that, yes, we do have to balance both vertical equity, that's ability to pay, and horizontal equity, that's access to services, and we can do a variety of those things. We can take care of horizontal equity by not applying a one-size-fits-all category to all residential land, or for that matter, to all business land. We can take care of the vertical equity by providing various kinds of concessions by way of exemptions from certain charges or by offering a more generous pensioner discount. Blacktown Council offers a discount not only to pensioners but to residents who have been in the area for more than 5 years. So they unashamedly favour certain types of landowner, and it's their right to do so. We can choose the mix of rates that we want. My motion charges council staff to go away and put together a fairly detailed report that encompasses all of these things. I'm happy to include and business category rates in my motion as well. I'll put it after the words that Councillor Jurek encouraged me to insert. So I can say, and can look at all other means, including pensioner discounts and variations and subcategories to the business rate, and that takes care of it. Beyond that, this amendment effectively eviscerates the tone of the report that I think a majority of councillors would want staff to bring back, and gives them a much muddier and more limited remit when we could do a better job by just going with the original form of words. Thank you.
Go for it,
Okay, I'll accept right of reply. Councillor Wheeler mentioned a particular instance that I think rather proves my point. A road in Wilberforce where there might be properties of 500 to 1,000 square metres on one side of the road and 5-acre properties on the other. And Councillor Wheeler says, well, why should the people on one side of the road subsidise the rates of people on the other side of the road when they make the same access to council services? But that's precisely my point. It's precisely my point. You've got families with similar incomes. Some of them live on acreage, some of them don't. And they have the same access to services, and yet the people on 5 acres are paying 2 or 3 times the amount of rates. That's my point. That's, I think, what offends many people's sense of fairness about the way that we put our rating structures together. Councillor Lyons-Bucket suggested that horizontal equity says that, you know, properties of the same size or characteristics should be rated identically. No, horizontal equity says precisely the opposite of that. Horizontal equity says if you make more or less the same access to a service, you get a benefit from the government, then you should, as far as the system can be read that way, to provide equity of how much you pay for access to that service. She also suggests that there's a warning in the Local Government Act that says that rural residential properties, may fail in some circumstances to meet the definition of being in a certain locality, being a part of a centre of a population. What she's not distinguishing is the difference between section 529, subsection 2, subsection B, subsection 1, and then subsection 2. It is perfectly legitimate to say that you can create a rural residential category simply because the land is rural residential. There are other levers that you can pull if the rural residential land is part of a centre of population. There are ways that we can create a business subcategory based on whether the business is part of a locality. Unfortunately, as much as we might want to, we can't simply pick on businesses above a certain size or with a certain revenue.
You cannot people.
But we can create centres, so we could create a patchwork quilt of definitions that try to capture those high yield businesses and then favour small businesses. I wish we could do that. And here's the thing, we're perfectly at liberty to do so. What I think offends people's sense of fairness is the cookie cutter approach, the one size fits all approach, that the person living on acreage, the pensioner on limited income, living in Oakville or Moralia or Vineyard or one of those areas that are adjacent to development where they have neither the desire nor the ability to subdivide in their lifetime, even if they should want to, and that their land value has doubled or tripled because of real estate speculation. I have lost count of the number of real estate signs that I've taken photos of that says future subdivision potential, and it's in an area that's not identified in our residential land strategy for subdivision ever. And I call them up and I say, are you suggesting that you know something that I don't? And their rates, the ad valorem component of their rates, spikes. And yet we apply precisely the same formula to that property with that particular difficulty and a pensioner living on a block in South Windsor or Hobartville. We have the ability to use the levers, as blunt as they are, as imperfect as they are, in a way that tries to maximise fairness. I'm glad that the amendment failed, because the amendment didn't even provide a mandate to the staff to say, look, our objective here is to favour horizontal equity, or indeed to favour fairness at all. That amendment simply would have produced a report that presented stuff back to us that we already knew. So I'm glad that the motion has the wording that it does, and I'm enormously hopeful that it will get up. And it was not my intention that this would be back before we make a decision on the SRV. The SRV is breathing down our neck, but I think it's an enormous gesture that the public will respect, that we are saying to the community it's a big ask to put rates up by the amount that's being suggested. But we are also mindful of the fairness argument, and we're doing work to see how we can adjust the formula. And unlike the Deputy Mayor, I think we can do both and argue publicly to help people understand the system and to distinguish between the formula and the quantum of rates that we collect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.